finishing up and so many other things I'm involved in, there's always extra time needed to do all the things I need to do, particularly leading up to Christmas. And the month of December and most of November is fairly busy too. So basically that's just where I've been, just really busy. Also, just so you know, I'm filming this video at 8 PM and it's summer in New Zealand, so it's nice and light outside still. So I have the door open, so you may be able to hear the birds chirping, traffic going past, but it's helping keep me cool, so I hope you don't mind the extra sounds in the background. So yes, just a brief update where I am, just to let you know that I'm doing okay. I hope you are all well too. I do miss making videos. I'm hoping in the new year I will have some more time in the evenings. The evenings are the only time I get to make these videos. It's quite often I come home from work and I just really don't have the energy to sit down and make a video. Anyway, I'm glad to be doing this one. So without further ado, I will read this story for you, a short story that Joy wrote. It's very nice of her to write this, and for me to be able to read it for you. So here we go. It is called Greenstone's Secret. There was an excited rap on the door at 58 Rata Street as James stood on the porch, waiting impatiently for the door to open. He was there to pick up his best friend, Tama. They were going to spend the next 2 weeks of the Christmas holidays together at his parents' beachside patch. Tama's solo mother worked as a caregiver at the local rest home, and she had been rostered on duty over the Christmas break. So when the opportunity came up for her son to join his friend's family for Christmas, she was very happy to let him go and have some fun. It didn't take long for James to hear the sound of feet running towards the door from the other side. Tama threw open the door and stood there with his blue backpack over his shoulder and black sleeping bag by his side, looking extremely happy to see his friend. Mrs. Hinare looked up behind her son and smiled down happily at James. Tama has been up since 5 AM this morning. He has been looking forward to this trip ever since you broke up from school, Mrs. Hinare said, grinning broadly. She then bent forward to give her son a hug. Now make sure you remember your manners, Tama, and be a good boy for the Robinsons. All good, Mum, Tama replied, as he almost struggled free from his mother's grasp. At age 11, it wasn't cool to be cuddled by your mother in front of your friends. It just felt awkward. Well, have a safe trip and enjoy yourselves, Mrs. Hinare added, as the boys started to head back down the path towards the Robinsons' SUV. The sun shone down brightly on the carload of passengers as they made their way along the winding road, heading for the coast. Mr. Robinson had inherited the batch from his grandparents, and it was always a family tradition to head there on Christmas Eve for the holidays. However, this was the first time James had actually been allowed to invite a friend along for the trip. Normally there was not enough room for any extras, but now that James' older brother Chris had gone to study in England, there was a spare bed in the boys' room at the patch. Tama's mum couldn't afford to buy him a cell phone, so James refrained from playing Pokemon Go on his mobile, even though he was itching to try out new locations. sea for a refreshing swim. Sadly for the boys, this was not going to happen. Well, not straight away. Mrs. Robinson wanted a hand to unpack the car, and Mr. Robinson asked James to help him remove a large branch from the front lawn, which had blown down from their Pohutukawa tree. James was sad because the fallen branch was the very branch that held their tyre swing in place for many years. His dad told him that he would reposition the rope onto another branch, so not all was lost. James was very fond of that old Pohutukawa. It never failed to be covered in a mass blanket of red flowers right on Christmas time, even though the family used a pine tree branch as their Christmas tree inside the patch. The Pohutukawa was still his favourite New Zealand Christmas tree. Finally, when all the chores were done, the boys, accompanied by Mr. Robinson, made their way onto the hot sandy beach with colourful towels rolled under their arms and big smiles upon their faces. The water was very warm, and they enjoyed an hour of fun splashing around in the sea and riding the waves into the shore, before they were called in by James's dad to head home. When they arrived, Mrs. Robinson asked them to go and chop down a suitable pine tree branch so she could decorate the Christmas tree. This was another family tradition which was observed each year, and Mr. Robinson knew just the spot to take the boys so they could find the perfect pine tree for the job. Once they had sawn off just the right branch, and Mr. Robinson had tied it to the roof of the SUV, they made their way back to the patch. As they drove along, the boys sat in the back seat trying to rub the sticky tree sap from their hands, while the strong scent of freshly cut pine permeated the interior of the car from the open windows. Mrs. Robinson seemed very pleased with their find, and she wasted no time in placing the multicoloured Christmas tree lights, red and gold tinfoil streamers, and very old-looking glass baubles onto the tree. Lastly, she added 2 aspirin tablets to the water in the large bucket. "Why do you do that, Mrs. Robinson? Has the tree got a headache?" Tama asked, with a cheeky grin on his face. "Well, if it does, it won't have one anymore," she replied, smiling back at him. "I read that it helps keep the tree fresh for longer. I never did find out if that was just an old wives' tale, but I do it every year all the same." "I will look that up on Google," James replied, taking his phone from his pocket. He scrolled down the screen quietly before relaying his findings. "It says here at a Christmas tree farm that you should do that, Mum, so I guess you were right." "Well, there you are then. It is amazing how much we can learn from searching the internet, even though I knew it all along. Now wash up for dinner, boys. We're having a barbecue tonight." The lads did as they were told, but even after scrubbing their hands with a nail brush, there were still remnants of sticky pine sap, and refused to be washed from their palms. After a yummy barbecue dinner and a long walk on the beach that followed, both boys were ready for a good night's sleep, even though they were excited the next day was Christmas Day. They lay in bed, listening to the sound of the waves lapping upon the shore, and the distant call of a ruru. Living in the city, Tama had never heard the call of a small native owl before, but he now understood why the Pakeha white man called it a moorpork, because that is exactly what it sounded, as if it was saying, "More pork, more pork." "That bird is clever," James said sleepily to his friend, as the pair lay there in the darkness. "How come?" Tama replied, somewhat unsure what his friend was getting at. "Well, it knows Mum is cooking roast pork for our Christmas dinner tomorrow. Perhaps it is happy we're not eating turkey," Tama replied with weary voice, as he rolled over into a comfortable position and was soon asleep. Tama took a bit longer to do the same. He lay there listening to the owl, and also the faint hope of hearing distant sleigh bells ringing. But soon the Sandman took over, and he too drifted into a deep slumber. Rays of sunlight peeked through the side of the closed curtains, and its warmth fell on James' face. He opened his eyes slowly, but as soon as he realized he was at the batch and it was Christmas morning, the excitement was too much, and he jumped out of bed quickly and shook Tama firmly on the shoulder to wake his friend. "Come on, Tama, it's Christmas. Mum always lets us open our presents before breakfast. So shall we go and see if my parents are awake?" Sure enough, when the boys went into the lounge, there were a number of brightly wrapped parcels under the tree, and Mrs. Robinson was in the kitchen boiling the jug for a cup of coffee. "Ah, no surprise to see you up at this hour, young Mr. Robinson," she stated with a smile. "Go and let your dad know I have a cup of coffee here for him, and when he comes through to the lounge you may open your presents." The next 10 minutes were accompanied by the sound of pulling ribbons, tearing paper, and oohs and ahs, as everyone opened the gifts from under the Christmas tree. Among the presents, both the boys had been given sturdy, small spades, which Mr. Robinson said would come in handy for digging up treasure on the beach. "I am going to get us a feed of Pippi and Tibatua," Tama said in an excited voice. "I thought you gathered those shellfish using your toes and hands," James replied in surprise. "Yes, but I bet a spade works even better," Tama answered happily. And the rest of the morning went by quickly. At lunchtime, the roast pork was cooked to perfection, and both boys were very full after their main course, followed by dessert of pavlova, topped with whipped cream and fresh strawberries. At first, that afternoon, they didn't feel like going on the beach until much later on, once their full tummies had receded a little from the huge meal they had eaten. But at 4 o'clock, armed with their new spades, a large plastic bucket, and smothered in loads of suntan lotion, which Mrs. Robinson had insisted on applying, the boys made their way down to the beach. They had been told that as long as they only paddled close into the shore, they were allowed to go unaccompanied by an adult. So the boys were very excited and felt very grown up that they were being left to their own devices. James said that they should make a huge fort with a large moat around the outside, using their spades in the bucket. "If we make the fort close to the incoming tide, the moat will fill up with water, and we won't have to carry up the seawater in the heavy bucket," Tama suggested. The pair set to work digging a large circle and putting the sand into the centre of it. They had been working on the moat for about 15 minutes, when suddenly James's spade hit something hard that made a pinging sound of metal upon stone. Tama looked up from what he was doing, and both boys had a surprised look on their faces as they stared at each other. "What have you hit?" Tama asked in an excited voice. "Have you found some hidden treasure?" James got down on his hands and knees and quickly started to remove the sand from around a smooth, solid object. Then triumphantly he held up the green stone club, Ponamu Patu, in his hand. He was totally stunned and surprised by what he had just found. However, he was very displeased when Tama did not share the same excitement. "You need to put it back," the young Māori boy said with a slight tremble in his voice. "Don't be stupid," James replied indignantly. "Finders keepers, and anyway, it is far too cold to bury again. Have you gone crazy?" as they had been friends, now within a few minutes of discovering the Patu. James was talking to his friend as if they were rivals. Tama understood James's excitement at finding such a mean-looking Māori club buried on the beach. It was amazing. But with all that, Tama's nun had taught him about this culture. He knew very well that such a find, if taken from its resting spot, was asking for trouble. James seemed to have lost all interest in finishing their fort. He wanted to take the Patu to show his parents. Tama followed him silently up the beach and across the road back to the Robinsons' patch. Mr. and Mrs. Robinson were amazed at James's find, and they didn't seem worried that there may be a curse on the club when their son told them what Tama had said. They told James that when they got back to the city, they would take his find to the museum and see if the staff could tell them how old the Patu was and any history behind it. That night when the boys went to bed, James immediately put the Patu under his pillow. He didn't want Tama taking it in the middle of the night and burying it in the sand again. Tama felt miserable that his friend was acting so offhand. The discovery of the club had caused nothing but discord between the pair, and Tama really just wanted to leave the Robinsons' patch and go back home. He lay awake listening to the waves and the distant call of the moorpork. Its hooting sounded different tonight, as if it was a warning of bad events to come. Tama rolled over and pulled the sleeping bag up over his head if a taniwha, or a water monster, was going to come and drag James away. Tama didn't want to see such horror. Thankfully, no such event occurred, but James's sleep was far from restful. He kept dreaming he heard shouting, and then he was being pulled underwater, but he couldn't see what was taking him down. All he could feel was a sharp pain in his chest, then everything went calm, as he was pulled into total darkness. The dream didn't just come into his mind once that night, and played over and over again like a broken record. The following morning, James felt as if he hadn't slept at all, but he wasn't going to tell Tama about his dream. He was sure Tama would say it was a curse, because he took the Greenstone Club, and he didn't want to hear such silly stories from his friend. That day, however, James was too tired to go and play on the beach. He just sat in a deck chair on the front porch of the patch and played on his phone. This, of course, made Tama feel even more miserable than he already did. There wasn't much point coming into a beautiful beach just to sit and play games online. Tama went and sat in the swing tie Mr. Robinson had retied to another branch of the Pohutukawa tree. He twisted the rope around and around in circles, and it couldn't twist anymore. He then let the rope go, so it spun him around and around faster and faster until the rope uncoiled and began to recoil in the opposite direction. This was better than doing nothing at all, and Tama enjoyed looking up between the branches at the mass of red flowers, which turned into a maze of red and green as the tie swing spun around beneath it. The days thereafter were not much better. James had no interest in going for a swim at the beach, even though the days were very hot and the water was very warm and inviting. He kept on making excuses for not going swimming. In the end, Mr. Robinson took Tama to the beach just so he could have a dip in the sea. James was too scared to tell his parents or Tama that the same dream kept revisiting him every night. It was making him feel very uncomfortable about going near the sea. He was starting to think he was losing the plot, going crazy, but he smooth stone. Finally, Tama could not stand the silence a moment longer. Mr. Robinson, would it be okay if you could show the patu to my koro and Nan before it is taken to the museum? Our tribe is from the same area James found the club, and my grandparents have a lot of knowledge about Māori artifacts and our family's whakapapa or genealogy. They might be able to help you learn more about the history of the patu James found. James shot Tama a menacing glance, but he stayed quiet as his dad answered Tama's question. That sounds like it could be a good idea, Tama. You speak to your grandparents first to see if they're happy to do that, and we will arrange a time to meet up with them and show them James's find. James stayed in the car when the SUV pulled up outside of Tama's home. Mr. Robinson jumped out to fetch Tama's gear from the boot, and James mumbled a quiet goodbye to his friend while Tama got out of the car. Tama took his pack and sleeping bag from Mr. Robinson and thanked them for letting him stay with them. He then made his way up the garden path without looking behind. He could almost feel James's eyes burning into the back of his head as he heard the car pull away from the curb and make its way up the road. The next week, Tama rang the Robinsons to let them know that his koro and Nan would be at the marae, the Māori meeting house, the following weekend. There was a cultural celebration they were attending there, and his koro said he would be very interested in seeing the patu. Tama didn't think James would be with his parents when they pulled up outside of the marae, but surprisingly, he climbed out of the back seat. However, he looked very pale and unwell, not the lively friend Tama was used to seeing every day at school. Tama ran up to meet them at the gate, closely followed by his Nan. "Are you okay, James?" he asked his friend in a whispered voice so that adults wouldn't hear. "Of course I am. Why do you care anyway?" James almost snapped back. "Wow, chill," Tama said, as he raised his hands in the air and took a step back. "I'm sorry, I don't mean to be so grumpy. I haven't been sleeping much lately, and when I do, I have bad dreams. Well, my Nan is into herbal medicine, so she might be able to give you something to help you. But I can tell you now it will taste yucky." Tama replied, looking over at his Nan, who was explaining to Mr. and Mrs. Robinson the formalities of being welcomed onto the marae. James gave his friend a weak smile, which was better than nothing. As the group stood there, a Māori man dressed in traditional costume came out of the meeting house, which was painted mostly in white. Its wonderfully carved pole supports on either side of the building and across the eaves of the roof were a reddish-brown colour, and they looked very cool. The man advanced towards them with dancing-type moves, and he called out in Māori as he waved a spear around his body in a graceful, but somewhat a threatening way. He then proceeded to lay a fern leaf on the ground in front of the visitors. Tama's Nan instructed Mr. Robinson to go and pick the leaf up. It was then that a Māori lady standing on the porch of the marae began a haunting chanted wail, which in turn was replied by Tama's Nan, while the visitors walked slowly forward towards the meeting house. It was the first time the Robinsons had ever been to a marae, and although James had seen a porphyry on the TV, it was so much better being there in person. Once they reached the building, they were instructed to take off their shoes, and then as they walked through the door and inside the wharenui, each of the group were greeted with a hongi, holidays were over, Koro asked James if he may see the patu. James carefully took the greenstone club from a small backpack. However, he was not prepared for the look on the old man's face as he held the patu up to the light. "This is a miracle. I have no words to express my delight at seeing this treasure of our past. I know well the story of your patu, James," he said with a heavy sigh. "But first I need to show you something." The old man stood up, and he went to the back of the wharenui. He opened a small glass and wooden cabinet that lay attached to the wall. From it he took out a greenstone patu, which looked almost identical to the one James had found. He came and sat down next to James and asked him to lay his patu on the flax-woven mat on the floor. Koro then put the other patu next to it. "See the lines of lighter colour that run through both patu and match up? There is a reason for that, James. These clubs were carved from the same piece of punamu. This patu I have was handed down through our family, and it was my great-grandfather's patu, and the patu you have found belongs to his older brother, Rangi." "How come it ended up buried on the beach?" James asked in a surprised voice. "Well, the story handed down to me is a sad one. Rangi was a great warrior. He stood up for his people and was earmarked as a troublemaker by the British troops. When the Māori Wars broke out, Rangi, his brothers and other warriors from the village were going via Waka, war canoe, to meet up with other villagers and fight for the land they felt English had stolen from them. As they were paddling away from the shore, a troop of British soldiers ran onto the beach and started firing at them with their muskets. Rangi was shot in the chest and fell into the water. The others managed to paddle away, but they never knew what happened to Rangi. Whether he was fatally shot, or whether he managed to swim to safety, he was never found. He drowned, James said quietly. Everyone seated around James looked at him with a surprised expression. "Rangi comes to me every night in my dreams. He has ever since I found the patu. I just want the dreams to stop," James added, trying to hold back tears. "Ah, I see," Koro answered softly. "Well, perhaps if you gifted the patu to the marae, it will be able to sit with its twin. Then you may be at peace once more. And of course, you are welcome to come and see it any time you like. I think Rangi would be arrested then, and the dreams will stop. It appears he has used you to help our people have closure of what happened on that day. My great-grandfather was always sad he was unable to find his brother. It is a good thing you found the patu, James. It has brought healing to our family." James smiled up at the old man. He felt an enormous weight